To explain to viewers the importance of conformation and function as it relates to the Gypsy horses is Wayne Hipsley from Lexington, Kentucky. Wayne has over 50 years of experience in the equine industry in a wide variety of consulting capacities and has held a variety of educational seminars in many different countries. Wayne has worked as a coordinator and instructor to educate and license horse show judges and has been a tireless proponent of breed education for many breeds around the world.
We're going to talk about how to evaluate and assess a Gypsy Vanner horse today. Not only their conformation, but also their personality. You can tell by the sense of curiosity that we have with this horse. He certainly is a very docile and friendly animal. This is a 4-year-old stallion, and it's the type of horse that we would definitely like to see breeding mares. He has the quality and overall conformation, structural correctness that we want to see, and we're going to talk about that.
Generally speaking, you want to look at conformation of the horse and the overall image, from top to bottom, front to rear. You want to gather an impression as to what this horse impresses you with. What qualities impress you? With Gypsies, we want to look at feather, the forelock, the profuse tail, and other features.
And we also want to look at the feathering on the horse, which starts above the knee in this particular case on the forearm, going down the back of the cannon and then covering the hooves. And you'll notice that we see the same thing front and rear. We want to see a large bushy tail on the horse. And as we move the tail to the side, we can begin to see that the feathering on the hind legs is not quite as high, but still of sufficient quality. So those are just a few of the key points that we want to see on a Gypsy Vanner horse that helps distinguish it from other horses.
Being a relatively new breed to North America, there are still many questions being asked about what constitutes a well-bred Gypsy horse, one worthy of the Vanner designation these horses so proudly carry. Wayne discusses proportion and balance, as well as how to objectively measure these two aspects to assess how the horse is built.
In order to be more accurate in our assessment, while we look at the balance and proportionality of a horse, we should actually turn the horse so that we see the horse without its mane, because the mane tends to distort the image of the horse, as well will color marking sometimes. So let's turn this horse around, face the other direction, and notice the difference. How this horse takes on an entirely different image. And let's get his head, there you go, straight ahead. And you can see now the length of neck that this horse has. You can see the set of neck. We can see that he comes clean off the shoulder, that he has good length to the upper side of his neck, and that it is longer than the underside of the neck, which is very desirable, and that he comes off clean from the point of the shoulder so that he has a very arched and forward-looking neck. We want to look at this horse from a proportional point of view. We want to see the height of the horse from the withers to the ground in relationship to the point of the shoulder, to the point of the buttock. All of that, when we consider how long the horse's neck is, how deep the horse's neck is, we begin to get a feeling of proportionality and balance. The horse should give you a positive, should give you a very good feeling. Not just a warm and fuzzy feeling that comes with emotion, but should be a very physical, measurable feeling that you get by looking at this horse. Now, in my hand, I have a device. It's nothing more than a divider that's used in the classroom to create circles on a blackboard or wherever. And we're going to use this and do some measurements that were created by the French many, many years ago, well over 125 years ago, when they were assigning jobs to people, asking them to go out and buy a certain type of horse for the cavalry. And what they would do is, let's have his head around this way, they would measure the horse's length of head, and we're going to do it in a very crude manner here, but it does work. Ooh, buddy. And we measure from the poll to the muzzle, get an approximate measurement. We use this measurement in a very, very objective way, because judging and evaluation can be subjective where we get our emotions involved, but let's use some of the objectives here of trying to determine balance and proportion. So for us to determine the proportionality and balance of the horse's neck in relationship to its head, one of the things that we'll do is lay the tip of this divider on the shoulder, reach forward with it, and determine a location that we have here on the other end, and you'll see that the length is anywhere from 3.5 to 4 inches longer, that his head is shorter than his neck, or we can say his neck is longer than its head. That's what we want to try to do, is we want to find out, we want to be able to measure what our eye is seeing, and this tool helps us do that. That says that this horse has a very desirable set to his neck, has a very desirable length to his neck, and allows for this horse to pick his head up just as he is at the moment, that he can, when bridled up, he should be able to flex at the poll region through the throat latch and give us a very nice set whether he's being driven or ridden. Another way for us to use this device is to measure from the point of the shoulder to the point of the hip or buttock area. So we go with 1, 2, the other side of the square will be the front legs from the ground. Let's step him up and get him squared off in the front, please. Good, right there, perfect. We'll start at the ground, measure up, 1, 2, and we'll come up here, and where we come across the top of the withers, we're looking at a very similar measurement of just over 2.5 and between 2.5 and 2 3/4 heads. So this horse is telling us that he is proportional. This device is confirming, if you will, what our eye is seeing, that his length of leg is proportional to his length of body. We can also do this with the hind leg, as we can start at the ground, come up to our second, and if we draw a straight line across this area, we have the legs as being proportional, so that this horse has one side of a square here that's vertical, that's equal in length to the other side of the square here, which is the front legs, which is nearly equal to the length of body of the horse, giving us a nice square picture. And that's what we want to use in determining whether the horse is balanced and proportional. Let's talk about how to measure a horse and how to determine its height, because there is a standard for measuring horses, and we use a unit of measure called hand. And it's equivalent to 4 inches. 1 hand equals 4 inches. And basically what it comes down to is if you take your hand from here to here, it is equal to, at least in my case, about 4 inches. And if I lay it here on the measuring stick, it starts at 12 and ends up at 13, and it'll show you that it's approximately 1 hand. And the system was developed in England many, many years ago, where they would take a hand and put it on the ground, another hand, and keep stacking them. But today we're a little more sophisticated. We have a measuring stick that will measure for us. We want to put it down near the hoof on the ground, make sure that it is vertical to the ground, that the horizontal bar that comes across will slide down on top of the withers, and we've got to make sure we get down to the withers, get through a little bit of that mane, and get our bubble on the level approximately at the correct height. And then we can stand here and say how tall this horse is, and he is, based on this, 14 hands, 0.1 inch. So if you are buying a horse, be sure to have this horse measured before you buy it, so you know how accurate the measurement itself is. It's really important, because you'll find a wide variety of Gypsy Vanner horses in a range of 13 hands to 15 hands, and it's important for you to know historically the height of the animal, so that as you develop a breeding program, you know what heights you're working with from a genetic point of view. We've looked at the profile of the horse looking for balance and proportionality, but there are two other views that we really need to see, and that is the front view and the rear view, looking at the hind legs and the front legs separately. So one of the things that we will start with is literally from a front view. We'll start by looking at the horse's ears, working our way down the face to the eyes, the muzzle, then start down through the neck and go from point of shoulder to point of shoulder, looking for good physical development in the chest area. We want to see the legs well separated, as this horse's are. And if we were to measure, and this is just a very crude way of doing it, if we have this width of measurement at the chest, we would like to find at least that much measurement or slightly less at the base, or where the front hooves touch the ground. And in this particular case, we're quite pleased with the width of chest and the front leg stance on this horse. The other thing is that just look for structural correctness. We'll run an imaginary line from the point of the shoulder down the front leg through the center of the knee, and then suddenly we get lost in the feathers, but we want to put it at a point where the toe of the hoof is touching the ground so that we can see how structurally correct the joints are, as well as the placement of the leg under the horse. In this particular case, this horse appears to be quite good. So let's turn him around and let's look at the hindquarters. And you need to be careful with any horse, especially if it's a horse that you're looking at to buy. You know, you want to make sure that horse knows you're there. You want to not only talk to him, but you also want to touch him with your hand and make some kind of contact that way, so that if you do just suddenly walk up and touch him, it's not like a strange horse that might activate their defense mechanisms, such as being scared and running off. Now, just like we did on the front end, we want to see good width between the hocks. We will not find the hind legs standing as wide as the hocks are apart. They will be standing, by nature of this particular breed, a little bit closer, and the horses will have a tendency to toe out. That means that the front of the hoof, where the toe is, will be pointing not in a straight line, but anywhere from 1 to 2, possibly 3 degrees off the straight line, so that it tends to toe out. But structurally, the leg itself is straight from the point of the buttock through that imaginary line that will come through the point of the hock, down the center of the cannon, and go right to the ground, making a very good vertical line. And I can probably demonstrate that with this divider. Move the tail out of the way again. And you can see that if we put the upper end at the point of the buttock, it does come through the center of the hock and can actually be used all the way down the hind leg. We like the physical development of this horse through the hip. We also will look up in the stifle area, this region right here, and we will look to see that the horse is well developed and muscled in this area, also down into the gaskin. And one of the things that we don't see very often, but it does show up, you want to make sure that where the point of the hip is on this side is equal to the point of the hip on the other. You want to make sure that the horse doesn't have the appearance of one hip higher than the other. And we will see that from time to time. If the horse has that, that's a serious defect, and we need to stay away from horses with that type of defect. So let's look at the front legs of the horse. Looking at a profile view, we've looked at the front view, and we talked a little bit about the profile before, but let's go and examine the front end a little bit more carefully. And one of the things that we want to do is look at the relationship of the animal's forearm in relationship to the animal's cannon. In this particular case, well, we'll use our dividers to go down here and measure from the ergot area, the back of the pastern, to what we call the accessory carpal bone, which is a bone that points right here at the back of the knee. And we lay it, that measurement up here, what we see is, where my finger is up here at the top, is about 2.5 inches, that the forearm is about 2.5 inches longer than the length of the cannon. That is very desirable. That tells us that this horse has the ability to reach forward with his front leg and be able to stride up and give us a very good length of stride at either the walk and the trot. We can't ignore the fact that we're also talking about the length of the shoulder and the angle of the shoulder, which actually comes and fits almost about a 52-degree angle, which would be measured by the inside of this arc, and tells us that this horse has a reasonably good shoulder angle. So, before we move away from this, we also want to talk about the size and definition of the joint. This horse has very proportional joints, has good bone and substance. He has a masculine appearance to him. And as we palpate the leg, one thing that we have to remember is that knee joint is going to be, that knee joint should be very large, tapering into a good clean cannon bone down to the fetlock joint, and buried in this feather is the fetlock joint, the pastern, as well as the hoof of the horse. One of the things that I suggest you do is pick up the hoof and look at the hoof on the horse. Look at the shape of the hoof. Look at the length of the heels, the overall shape of the hoof, to see that this horse has a good, solid, sound hoof. We watched the horse move one time, and you notice if you were careful, you couldn't see very much in the hind leg. So therefore, it may be helpful if we take the tail, and it's also good from a safety point of view to have the handler on the same side of the horse that you are. But take the tail and just put it in a gentle knot, like this. It can pull out pretty simple, and he probably will have it pulled out by the time he gets where we're going. But what will happen is we can actually watch the tracking now of the hind leg.
Doug and his team have heard just about all the questions one could ask about this breed. He discusses with Wayne some of the most common questions asked, particularly about how judges in the show ring evaluate the horse's feather, color, conformation, knees, eyes and ears, and overall impression.
Hi, Wayne. One of the biggest questions I think that people ask, including myself, I have been asking this for years, as a judge in the ring, when you're judging horses on their conformation, how important is the feather, the profuse feathering on these horses when in overall points, so to speak?
Well, Doug, the answer to that is that we have to judge horses based on their breed characteristics. And the unique characteristics of the Gypsy Vanner horse is the long mane, the dense mane, the long and dense forelock, definitely the leg feathering, which is unique to the breed, And then we also see a large bushy tail. If we don't see that in the show ring, well then that horse really does not qualify, if you will, for having the breed characteristics that we're looking for as a judge. So people may think that we're not looking at feathering,
Yes.
but we certainly have to give an advantage to a horse that has a denser, heavier feathering than a horse that doesn't.
Sure.
Now, one of the problems with that is dealing with a young horse.
Yeah.
And we want to see good feathering in these young horses, realizing that they have the potential to add more density, if you will, and more length at the same time. So we have to look at them in relationship to their ages as well.
How should the Gypsy Vanner horse tail be set in the back?
How should it be set?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's go back here just for a second. What we're talking about, I'm going to step around on this side of the horse, is we have to first locate the point of the hip, which is about where my fingers are. Can you see that?
Yes.
And then we come back and then we look at where the tail actually departs the body, and we call that the tail set, or the tail head in some cases, and how it fits into the croup. And the croup is measured in a line that goes across from here to the tail head.
Right.
Okay? And in a Gypsy Vanner horse, because of its breeding, its genetic background, even though it's unknown in many cases, there is a strong draft influence. And so with a horse with strong draft influences, we tend to see a more round croup, not necessarily a level croup, where the tail would literally come out up here. So we expect the tail head to be a little bit lower.
Right.
More round, but it gives us the capacity for more muscling.
Right.
And typically, we think of it in a way to permit the horse to have the ability to put its legs underneath of it to be able to pull a load, if you will, as opposed to the legs being out back behind the horse.
Right.
So the angle of the croup, the roundness of it, and the tail set all fit into a big puzzle that deals with the impulsion of the hind end of this horse.
Right. I understand now. Another question I think that comes up a good bit and is the ears on this breed. You know, we see some people that are breeding for these smaller ears, and some people are really hung up on the ears are too big or they're too small. Is there any point to this?
Well, it's interesting. You know, ears are important in that we like to see a nice short ear, well-shaped ear on a stallion, and we want to see on a mare a well-shaped ear. But generally in mares, we tend to forgive a mare with a little bit longer ear. And in this case, this mare's ear is a tad bit long. But we also have to remember that the development of the ear needs to be where it's wide. Let me show you where it should be. We want to see it a little wider through here because it allows the horse greater capacity to hear.
Sure.
And so the horses sometimes make up for the capacity of not being able to hear by a longer ear, allowing a greater collection basin, if you will, like
Yes.
putting my hands around my ears here.
Well, I've always thought that possibly the larger ears on the breed might have come from their draft ancestors like the Clydesdale or the Shire. And some of the smaller ears I'm seeing, I'm just guessing that maybe they're coming from the pony breeds that were bred.
Well, that's possible. But
Yeah.
we see variations within all breeds, long ears, short ears, but we as judges know to forgive a mare that has a slightly longer ear, whereas we might penalize the stallion with a longer ear.
Wayne, another question that pops up from time to time is the flatness of the bone here. I was told as a breeder 10 years ago that this is what we wanted to breed, and we didn't want to see the knobby knee on these horses.
Yeah, that's rather straightforward, and the answer is that we want to see a relatively flat joint, and we talk about flat in that we follow the forearm down into the cannon here, and there shouldn't be a large interruption. But looking at the leg from the front view, we want to see a definite distinction in size of joint, because we've got several bones that are articulating in here, and they have to have the capacity, both from the inside and outside, for it to support the leg as the horse moves forward. We have to remember that 60% of the horse's weight's on the front end when the horse is standing. So it's very important that we have correct knees on the horse, and in order to define that, we have to have joints that are substantial. And in this particular case, in a mare, she's feminine, but yet she has sufficient amount of bone and substance to be able to support herself at 60% of weight.
But if we saw a little extruding going on here with a bone, would that be a fault?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
And that could be an injury, it could be a lot of things. And occasionally you will see horses with round or knobby knees. I don't see it all that often. Many times they have other defects associated with that, that will turn up in movement.
Yeah.
And when that happens, the horses usually break down and they eliminate themselves early on.
Certainly. Wayne, another question that keeps popping up, and I've heard you discuss this a little bit before, is the eyes on the Gypsy Vanner horse, how they should be set on the head. I think should be an important question people have asked us that you could comment.
Sure, Doug, there's several different aspects of it. The one thing that we want to do with the eye and overall head is look at the distance between the eyes. The distance between the eyes should be greater than the distance between the ears. We don't want a horse that has a long, narrow head. This mare has a nice flat forehead. Her eyes are what we call stuck out on the sides of her head, on either side here, okay? They're nice and large, they're very prominent, very distinct. Although they are not dark in color, they're what we call a blue eye. And the breed is very common. We would definitely expect to see this within this breed, and it shouldn't be faulted for it. There are some breeds that would fault the horse for it. This is not one of them. But one of the reasons we want this eye out on the corner of the head, and I'll show you as I step back here, if you can kind of hold her head straight ahead, forward.
Yep.
And I can still see her eye. You can watch her ears, she's signaling. She can still see me out of her right eye.
Sure.
Whereas if her eye was a flat eye laying against the head, she wouldn't be able to see it.
Right.
So it's really important that the animal have this ability to be able to have a well-placed eye on the head, be prominent, and it gives the animal a whole different opportunity for vision, because what happens is we get a flat-eyed horse. They tend to be pig-eyed, small, undersized eyes, which affects their overall field of vision.
Is it true that people say that horses see two different images from both eyes?
That's actually true. The horse has what we call both binocular and monocular vision. And what happens is the horse, believe it or not, can't actually see what it's eating. It doesn't have the ability to do that, and that's why a horse will use its whiskers, it will use its a sense of smell to feel and taste, if you will, its feed, and it knows that grass is down there. But the way the field of vision works is the horse, when it's looking straight ahead, forward, it's the only time that both eyes function with the same image. Otherwise, and you can watch a horse's ears and watch where it's looking, essentially by the flexion of where the ears are, whether they're moving forward and backwards. And it's really important when we think about training a horse, and people don't realize that.
The Gypsies started out breeding these horses to be specifically black and white, 50% white and black, and through the years people have bred other colors. Does color have any influence in the ring with judging at all, or what they?
Yes, color does affect, and there's several different ways I can answer this question. If we're judging horses, we have a descriptive term called color distortion. And if you had a horse that had a spot at a different location than perhaps where this mare is on her hip, it could affect the overall image of how the eye measures the length of back, the length of croup, tail set, whatever the case happens to be. So as a result of it, color does come into play from that point of view in being able to assess conformation. And then of course a horse that has a unique conformation within the breed, see roans and with dark or black feathers, anything that really makes them look special or different, makes them stand out in the show ring. And you have to realize a judge only has about 25 to 45 seconds to assess conformation horses. So anything that makes them special then is in your, really your advantage when you're in the show ring.
You could maybe call that a wow factor.
Oh yeah, it is.
The character of the horse and how it picks itself and
and you've
sets
got to
itself.
be really careful as a judge and don't let the wow factor overwhelm you. And even if you're going out to buy a horse, don't let wow take your good judgment away. It's really important because a horse may be wow, but it still may not have correct legs. We want a horse that has reasonably refined throat latch. That means this region. A throat latch is a region, but it's also a part of a bridle. And we talk about a throat latch because it attaches permanently on the right side of the bridle, comes under the throat latch region and attaches on the other. With a horse with a reasonably refined throat latch has the ability, when its head is elevated, to flex itself at the pole. And by doing that with the head up, flexion at the pole means that that horse then can shift. That 60% of weight on the front end can shift about 10 to 15% to the hindquarters, which then gives it greater capacity to move forward with the proper impulsion. So the throat latch is attached to the neck, which is also affecting the actual distribution of weight and the actual ability for impulsion of this horse. So it goes link, 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 link.
Now, wouldn't that also have something to do with when the horse would try to get in the bit? He would have probably a hard time breathing if it was too thick through here?
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, that's because man is asking the horse to do something that it was not meant to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of these horses that are thick in the throat latch, that are naturally thick in the throat latch, are that way. And we're not going to train it out of them. We're not going to change them.
Right.
And that's one of the faults that we run into with a lot of people today. They buy a horse and try to make it into something it wasn't designed to be. There are variations within the breed in height as well as in body type that we've got to keep that in mind, that are well suited for riding.
Yes.
So these horses have a lot of ability to perform the spectrum of riding to driving.
What are some of the disciplines you think this horse is cut out for in its form today? That's a broad statement.
Yeah, it is, because it goes back to, I think, the disciplines are riding and driving, if you will.
Yeah.
Do I see these as making Olympic style or jumper horses? No. Does that mean that one could not become that? Absolutely possible.
Yeah.
What about dressage horses? There are some of these horses I've seen perform in dressage and do extremely well athletically. And then the average, though, says I don't do well there, but I do a lot better as a driving horse, and I do a lot better as a pleasure recreational riding horse, or even as a Western pleasure horse, for example. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Good.
Well, I want to thank you for all your comments because I've just had all these questions, so you've done a lot to educate me today.
Good, good.